in a single isolated incident, even if the kid was predicting the sex of the baby. At best, the little girl went boy, boy, girl, and got 3 in a row. You know how trivial it is to get 3 coin tosses in a row?
Not only is that trivial, but I have to read this section because it kind of made me laugh. This is actually, when I responded toward the end of the discussion, I said, finally, and this was simply something I did for grins, but wanted to share. And even though I respect your sign-off, because he had signed off at that point and said he had no further questions or comments, I said, even though I respect your sign-off, as I'd gone to the trouble, it can't hurt to let you know the results. No reply needed. I try to assume the best-case scenario when someone tells me a miracle occurred and gives me details. I generally, although I don't accept their word as truth, will go with a hypothetical case of, let's say everything they're reporting is 100% true and accurate, and then I examine the story. The only time I stick is when they assert something that is so outside the bounds of reality that your word is just too unreasonable to accept as possible, in which case I would ask for more evidence or explanation from the person. But in this case of Emily's story, I interpreted you to be asserting that you took "this is not Emily" to mean "this is a boy." And you may or may not have intended that, I understand. However, later when you asked how is it possible for a child to predict the sex of a baby, I was actually considering what if she predicted successfully the sex of all 3 children? What if we take her vague statements about the boys as "this is a boy"? And then we say Emily associates at the end and is an accurate prediction of a girl. Well, generally babies come in one of 2 sexes, barring hermaphrodites for the moment, and I know I've already noted this. However, we can test the likelihood of predicting A or B outcomes on a run of 3 accurate guesses in a row, by using a coin toss. And let me just point out that it doesn't even matter if you toss the coin. You could literally be looking at the coin and hiding it from me and ask me to guess, and it would still be the same thing.
Yeah.
Can I get it right? It doesn't have to be a random toss. It just has to be something I can't see that has 2 potential outcomes. So say heads is a boy, tails is a girl. We flip and we ask a subject to predict the outcome. If they can predict 3 outcomes consecutively correct, we have recreated what your sister would have done. If she had predicted all the birth sexes accurately, and this is what was funny, and I did this. This morning, without explanation, I took a quarter and asked my husband to predict coin flip outcomes. He said heads every time and got 3 in a row on the first 3.
It's a miracle!
Thus reproducing your sister's miracle results in a best-case scenario for your story. And again, anyone can try this on their own. Just start tossing a coin. Do 100 tosses and see how many times you get 3 accurate in a row.
Well, you don't even have to do the tosses. The math is really simple. You have a 1 in 8 shot of getting 3 in a row on a coin toss. 3 in a row is, if 1 in 8 is a miracle.
But who would say that what my husband did is miraculous?
Nobody.
I know, and I'm just like, this is what you're presenting me with, and you're asking me how can science possibly explain this? And it's like, this is so mundane, I don't even know why it's impressing you.
Yeah, it's not even really a 1 in 8 because there's not an explicit prediction of the sex of the kids. But even if it were, even if we granted that that was the case, you've taken a 1 in 8 shot, and then you've glommed extra irrelevant bits onto the story.
Loads of them.
Oh, she was once dead.
A lady in white told her to guess heads.
Told her
to guess heads.
Yeah.
And then she had died before she saw this woman who told her that the coin would be on heads. And it's just, you just start building and building this giant superfluous mass of data when really all you're saying is she guessed a 50-50 outcome and got it right.
Yeah, this is exactly how people lose fortunes. This lucky rabbit's foot, the gambler's fallacy, I'm due for a win, I got these 2 right, there's something, I'm in my groove, and now I'm going to get the 3rd one right. I think the miracle here is that the people who are gullible enough to believe this in a religious context haven't lost everything they own to somebody who's just...
To a preacher?
Well, yeah, to a preacher. somebody who's slightly less ethical.
There are some people that were on, that commented on, when I posted like a few items on Facebook about this, and there's more than one person actually said that they do something like the following. One guy said, whenever somebody tells me online that they've lost something they can't find, like their TV remote or their keys, I say, check behind the couch or check in the couch cushions. And he's like, most of the time they check and it's not there, but every now and then someone checks and they find it. Yeah. And he's like, you should see how they freak out. And they're just like, oh my God, you're psychic, you're psychic. He goes, and he's like, 100 times I could do this and it's wrong. He's like, but the one person that hits it, they think it's just so impressive. He's like, you can't believe how impressed they are. And I told him this guy would be like your ¡1 disciple.
I probably have talked about this before, and I'm not actually exposing anything secret, but I'll tip you to something that happens quite often. Well, I won't say how often. I know that there are a number of professional magicians who make use of this, and that is the principle of getting lucky. I've used it before myself. For example, you're going to make a prediction. I might pull a card out of a deck of cards and place it down on the table face down as a prediction, and then ask you to name a card. Now, almost every time, you're not going to name the card that's on the table, at which point, since you have no idea what I was doing with that card, I'm going to make use of that card in some way to reveal what you picked and go on with the trick that I had planned. But on those rare occasions where you actually do say the name of the card that's on the table,
blow somebody's mind.
That is an impossible trick.
Right.
It's impossible to backwards analyze and figure out, well, how could he have done this? There's no work there. There's nothing. And it's because it was just happenstance. Now, there are ways, for example, to improve the odds that they're going to say the card that you lay out there. And I'll leave that for people who are in the trade to investigate, or I don't want to blow anybody's secrets too much. But the fact of the matter is, for example, the most commonly named card when you ask somebody just to name a card is the Ace of Spades. Well, if you put the Ace of Spades down every time, you're going to get it right more often than you would, for example, Seven of Clubs or whatever. Probably. I mean, it's a psychological element. But the fact of the matter is, most people aren't going to find that as amazing. There's something, we've attributed some significance to the Ace of Spades, the Death card or the highest of the spades. We give, that it's not surprising that somebody might name it, or that you might have predicted somebody might name it. I think that's at least common enough knowledge where it's not as good of a prediction. It's like it's almost like predicting whether somebody's going to pick the donut or the carrot, when offered. If you know something about their character, if you know they're diabetic, you know that they probably really want the donut, but they'll go for the carrot type thing. So there's lots of ways to make use of that. And it's all about having, in the case of magicians, it's about having information that your audience doesn't have access to. And in the case of this miracle story, it's about nobody having access to that information. And so you make up a grand explanation for how someone might have come to this information.
It's just sad. I mean,
it's a white woman in a white room.
You've shown me like a couple of very tiny card tricks, and it's really funny because the few people I've shown them to, not the trick, but like done the trick on, I've had at least 2 people I can think of tell me that they were so freaked out they wouldn't do it again. Like it freaked them out, and it's a trick. I mean, it's a card trick. It's set up like a card trick. There's nothing spooky about it. I mean, there's like the little story about how you're being psychic, but it's clearly like a joke and a trick. And yet they don't know what the trick is, and so they're so tripped out by the outcome, being so tricky.
Yeah.
That it really psychologically just weirded out a couple people that won't do it again, won't even try it again. And the other thing that was interesting about not just this story, but you kind of touched on it a little bit when you said something about bringing someone back from the dead to then make this mundane prediction. Mm-hmm. The heartbreaker sometimes with these stories is, what about the kids who actually die? So what you have here is this concept of, my sister was brought back from death or the brink of death in order to say that 3 children later, my mother would have a daughter after 3 kids, that she would, pop out a girl. And yet, all these other children who drown and die every year, I guess they didn't have anything significant to say, or, whatever mundane crap they could have added to the world, it wasn't important enough, I suppose, to to have them saved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, basically you have some irresponsible parents who left a 3 or 4-year-old
Yeah.
near a pool
Yeah.
and were so relieved that their daughter wasn't dead so that they didn't lose a child that they, I guess, care about. Although not enough to watch while they're near a pool.
Now, and before anybody criticizes that, because let me say, it doesn't take long. I will admit that it doesn't
Fair
take
enough.
long for a child to fall into a pool and get into trouble. And in Florida, we learned that too. That, boy, they can get out of your sight and hit that pool, and boy, it doesn't take long. But they do float for a while before they sink. And one thing that was interesting when I asked for clarification on the girl being dead, in order to demonstrate to me that she was dead, it was explained to me that she had been in the water a long time. So this isn't the case of parents who turn their back for a second.
Yeah, and some kid fell in the
Because
pool and-
part of the reason this person wanted to convince me she was dead was because he knew she had been in there for so long that she had sunk to the bottom of the pool. So he's describing a situation where there really was negligence. It's not just a matter of, the way he's describing it would be more than I saw her floating in the pool, grabbed her. It's like she literally was was waterlogged at that point, is what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
Additionally, he said that how she fell into the pool, which would have to be the word of another 3 or 4-year-old, so I don't know how accurate this could be because nobody was out there that could have helped her. So clearly there were no adults present. But he claims that another little 3 or 4-year-old was also playing around the pool, fell in and was drowning, and that in an attempt to help him get out, that's how she got pulled in. So what he's describing is a story where there are 2 toddlers running around a pool with no supervision. One of them falls in and is struggling to get out of the pool, sloshing around, struggling to get out. The other 3 or 4-year-old goes over, tries to get them out. That one then falls in. She ends up sitting in the pool so long that she sinks to the bottom. The other one finally gets himself out. By the time he gets inside, then they know what happened. So at the point he gets done telling the story, I'm just like, you have here a group of irresponsible adults. I mean, I don't know how many people were there. You say you were there, and I don't know if you were one of her younger brothers, or, I mean, you were there, so you were an older brother, you'd
Yeah.
have to be. So you're there, and you've got other people there, you've got this mortician there, and I'm thinking maybe there might have been some other, because you said many people, there was many witnesses to this story, was what you said initially. So you've got all these people here, and nobody has the responsibility or the wherewithal to say, where are the toddlers? Isn't there a pool in the back?
Yeah. There's one other aspect to this story that struck me, and it's something that I didn't notice right off the bat, and I don't imagine most people do, and I don't imagine even he has. This whole story is about a paragraph. It's a handful of sentences describing a number of events that are
Over years.
Yes, that's the point that I'm getting to. You had a little girl who was traumatized by a drowning and made a claim. Now, I don't remember much from when I was 3 or 4. I'm not even sure I remember anything from when I was 3 or 4. But her mom then gets pregnant and has a kid, which is not the one. So there's at least 9 months.
Right, yeah.
Then gets pregnant, has another kid. That's at least another 9 months. We'll call it a year in between.
Right.
So now, when the third one comes around, we're talking about a kid that's now 6 or 7.
Several years old,
and,
yeah.
and for 2 years or more, the family has kept this story going.
Right.
Is it surprising at all that she might be subject to the gambler's fallacy of the do for?
Just keep guessing.
Yeah, this is the one that's Emily. Maybe I'm tired of you guys bringing up the story about how I drowned, so now I'm going to call this one Emily.
Yeah, one of the things I actually thought, and like I said, you can't take it at face value, but one of the things I thought was children have very different, just because a child fantasizes about a thing doesn't mean they want it in reality. And you can demonstrate this by every child that goes to see Santa at the mall that refuses to sit on his lap. How many kids sit there dreaming of Santa on Christmas Eve, and I love Santa, and I'm gonna be good for Santa, and the moment you take them to see the real Santa, they'd rather die than get on that lap. And they're gonna scream and freak, and they don't even want to get near the guy. So there's a big difference sometimes with what a child claims to fantasize about that they want, or that they seem to want, versus what they really want. And for a child of 3 or 4, they're getting significant attention from a parent still. They're at an age where they're getting all the attention. And the idea, this little girl understands sibling, because she said she had a little sister. She called her a little sister. So she understands what a sibling is. And she probably has friends who have sisters that live or share a room or share whatever. And you have to ask yourself, is she one of the kids at that point that if you really said, do you really want a little brother or sister, we're going to go get one for real, that she would be the type that says no.